80% of leaders feel that their company is good at crafting a strategy, but only 44% feel that they are good at strategy implementation. 67% of well formulated strategies failed due to poor execution. Say, what? Is that really true? Today, we're going to talk about business strategy from creating a plan to implementation. If you're ready to join me, come on over. This is Strategy Talks. Let's do it.
Let's strategize together. Let's hear it from an expert. Join the conversation, it's informative and free. You and me, let's talk some strategy. Now here's your host, Dorien Morin-van.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another live episode of Strategy Talks. I want to welcome all of you. If you're here on LinkedIn, hello. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, hello to all of you. And last but not least, I want to welcome those of you who listen to Strategy Talks as a podcast, whether you listen on whatever favorite platform you're on. Welcome and know that I appreciate you listening. And today we have a special guest joining us from Canada. Phyllis is here. She's Dutch. I have kind of teased this episode as another double Dutch episode. And Phyllis immigrated to Canada from the Netherlands about 2.5 years ago. And so we were just talking in the green room, and I asked her if there were a lot of cultural differences about business strategy in the Netherlands versus Canada, but she mainly works with Dutch clients. So we're not actually going to discuss that part. So welcome, Phyllis. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Nice to be here.
Absolutely. And you're up very early. She's on the west end of Canada. So it's 8 a.m. where I am, and it's 6 a.m. where she is. So I appreciate you getting up early and being ready to answer some questions. So Phyllis, let's dive into the first question, right? When we talk about strategy, what does strategy mean to you? And how do you differentiate between a good strategy and a bad strategy?
A strategy for me is knowing where you are now, knowing where you want to go with your business or whatever you're making the strategy for, and the way that you're getting from this point to that other point, like the plan that you make to reach a certain goal. Like in business, you set some goals, and knowing how to get there and making that plan, which steps to take first, after each other. That is for me the very simple definition of a strategy, like a way to reach your goals. And if you ask me about like the difference between a good and a bad strategy, a good strategy is one that consists of the whole roadmap. Like you think it through from beginning till the end, but still there is flexibility. There is room because you can't plan everything in life. It's simply not possible. And also a very important part is the ability to execute it. Just not only you can have, if you have a strategy which is only on paper and looks perfect, but no one knows where to start, how to implement it, how to actually take that steps, then it's a bad strategy. Because it is not a strategy if it doesn't, it's not implemented.
Right. If it doesn't produce any results, right? That makes a lot of sense. So that gets me into the next question, which is, who owns the strategy, right? So I, as a social media strategist, I often get hired by the CEO of a small business company. I work with entrepreneurs, with coaches, with, the owner of a business, right? Sometimes it's a consulting business. It could be, a restaurant, a law firm. I get hired by the owner and I work with them to create the strategy. But who then owns the strategy? Does yeah, let's talk about that. Who is involved in creating it and then owning it, but also implementing it? And if people are worried about, like, say they're a solopreneur, I'm assuming they're responsible for implementing it. So let's talk it out. Let's talk it out.
Yeah, I feel the one who's owning it is the parties involved that need to be involved to get that strategy to a good end. Like if it's a strategy that involves not only the CEO making it or giving his approval to the strategy, but also the people that need to actually implement it and do the work. And I think there's different types of ownership. It's
Okay.
ownership over the whole process, the complete overview, which for me is the higher level of management that is supposed to be the complete overview. But if you parts of that strategy, if those are need to be executed by different parties in the business, everyone owns that their own piece. But it doesn't stop there because not every piece is separate from the other one. Like everything
Right.
is it's connected to each other. So I think it's an ownership of all parties involved, but there needs to be a certain point in the organization that also needs to keep track on, are we going the right way or are we going the wrong way, and do we need to change some things to get back on track?
Right. So are you suggesting there should be a project manager for the strategy implementation if you have several people implementing several pieces? Or are you saying everybody just needs to agree to meet once a month and look at progress and get that feedback loop started and saying, where are we? Are we moving forward? Are you saying a project manager and everybody, kind of reports to a project manager, or should it be more of a equal, like, let's meet once a month and everybody gives their report and works together? What do you think is better?
I don't. I think it really. It depends on the type of organization and how well they are used to implementing strategies, doing projects as a whole. Is the team really? Do they know how to work with each other? Is it like a team that exists for years and everyone just knows? Yeah, if it has to be done, it has to be done. But if it's quite a new team, or if it's something new or a new way of working, then it's better to have a project manager overseeing the whole project. So I don't think there's one answer to the question, because it really depends on the business and the size of the business and the experience level of everyone involved, what would be the best way. And I think to know from the start what you need um, is also to get those parties involved at the beginning and not just dump a strategy on them. Like, now you do this. And okay, it's completely different. But yeah, that's what we decided. I think if you get involvement prior to the actual implementing, then you also have that ownership part again.
Yeah, so let me ask you that follow-up question then. So when you work with a company that has more than one, so it has an owner and several employees, when you work with the owner, say to implement or to create a strategy, do you say, I need everybody on the team in at least one meeting? I need to know, I need to get to, is that what you do? You get everybody involved in that process?
Yeah, because I feel the involvement of all parties that have some work to do in the whole process. I think that's also where you can end up with a bad strategy if people not involved and don't feel the need to actually perform the work, or like the timeline that you set up. And I feel if you involve them and communicate with them, like in whole life, lots of things come back to communication.
Of course they
And
do.
yeah, so if you get that communication part really early involved already and keep it going, there's a higher chance of success.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So let's move into budget and resources, right? So and actually resources will be next. Let's do budget and goals. So one of the first question I ask when I talk about social media strategy is to the owner, because I usually work with the owner. I say, what are your goals? And I want two types of goals. I want, what are your social media goals? So why do you want to be on social media? But I
Hmm.
also want to know, what are their business goals? Because from what I understand is, and how I look at it, marketing goals are set by business goals, and social media goals are set by marketing goals. So it's business goals first, then marketing goals, and social media goals. So when we're talking about goals and goal setting and then budget, again, who's in charge? How do you set a budget? Because we all know you could spend $1,000 on marketing, but you can also spend $1 million on marketing. So how do you have that conversation as somebody who works with people and who helps them with business strategy? How do you start that conversation about budget and goals with your clients?
Well, first, indeed, what you say, it's important to know the goals, to know the business goals, to know where they derive from. Like, how did you come up with this goal? And then, well, if you look at marketing goals and then, like you said, to the social media goals, I think it's important to look at historic milestones that have been reached. Not saying that you have to stay within those limits, but just to have a view on it, to see what did it cost you to
Mhm.
reach those goals? What did you do for that? And then it can be interesting if a goal is 10 times as high, but the budget two times or like half. Like how does it work? How did you came up with these numbers? And
Mhm.
it's getting into that conversation with the party that is responsible for the budgeting part,
Mhm. Mhm.
and just have that open conversation. Just take me with you. Just explain your thought process. Just and then it's yeah, that's amazing to see because you see in those eyes and those faces like, oh yeah, I maybe didn't think that all through. I just put some numbers there and just thought, oh well, we'll just see. And yeah, then just opening that conversation, like just talk me through it. Just the person who made eventually that plan, that goals, that gave the approval to this number, just take me with you, explain, and then we can
Right.
talk about it.
Right. So that makes a lot of sense. So what you're saying is, especially when you come in as a business strategist, or when you, if you're a business owner and you want to create a new strategic plan because either things weren't working or you're ready to scale, to go look at your past, look at the budget you had and the milestones you were able to reach with that budget, and then take that information to create a realistic budget, not a, pull out of the air number and say, well, I have this budget and these are my goals. And, for you, if you're listening or watching this, you can reach that goal with that budget. It might take you 10 times as long, right? So there's something to think about, right? So
Yep.
there's also part of those goals and setting those goals is a timeline, right? It's not just, I want to reach this goal, but when do I want to reach it? Well, if you want to reach it in
Yep.
1 month, you might need to 10x your budget. If you want to reach it in 1 year, maybe 2x your budget. So again, all those things work together, and I think that that's a great way to look at it. I love that question that you said, walk me through it. Talk me through your reasoning and your thinking. And then do you find that as a business strategist you end up adjusting either the business goals or the budget with your clients when that happens?
Usually. Yeah. It's just because I a lot of goals derive from ambition, and I love being ambitious, like as a person, but as a business too. But there's a line between ambitious goals and is it feasible in any way? And that's why I use that talk me through it method because when someone talks you through it to explain it to someone else, they see the flaws in their reasoning, Or I just ask questions like, okay, explain, and why this, why not that, or like, what are the alternatives? And usually then you end up with some changes. Usually, like you said, timeline too. Like timeline is a big thing because it's very interesting to see that past results took them, for example, years, but that extent growth that wants to be reached, yeah, 6 months. Like then suddenly the whole timeline, it's very short, and then the budget can play a role. So everything is a bit out of control. And if you align everything together and have realistic expectations, chances of reaching it are so much bigger. And that makes also all parties involved way more positive towards
Yeah.
actually implementing and getting the results of the whole plan. And I think that's a really important part, to also have that in between milestones that you can reach. And I also say celebrate. Doesn't have to
Right.
be a big party. It doesn't have to be
Right.
something extreme, but just stand still with the fact that you're reaching some small milestones while going through that final goal, to be able to, as a whole team, as all parties that are there working on it, are like, yeah, we did this. Like, you see what we can do in 2 weeks or a month. And if we continue going on this, instead of only looking at that final point, like, I need to go there, I need to go there, then
Right.
you're always like, we're still not there. And that will be, yeah, a burden is maybe a big word, but it can be a burden on everyone to be like, oh, we're still not
Can
there.
be
We're
tough
still
to,
working
yeah,
on it.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
pressure. Yeah, a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So I just want to welcome Carinder was here and Brian was here. They're watching live on LinkedIn. Just want to say hi. But I have a follow-up question, Phyllis. So this has to do with the resources. So, you said to look back at your own numbers to set your business goals and your budget, right? But then you have to, once you set the budget, you have to allocate time, money, and people. And it's very easy to look at somebody else, a competitor, and say, look at what they accomplished in 6 months. But here's what I tell my clients is like, you don't know the budget. You don't know the resource. They might have 10 people on customer service. They might have 3 full-time marketing employees, right? You don't know their resources. So if you don't know what your competitors are doing, but you're seeing their results, and you need to set your own, you need to allocate your own resources. How would you advise a client to go about resourcing their time, their budget, their money, and their people? How does that start? How do you start implementing, and how often do you check? Because I'm sure that where you start might not be where you end up. Is that a weekly check-in? Like, how are we doing on time? How are we doing on budget? Is it a monthly? How does that work? I'm trying to get to is like actionable things that people can
Yeah.
take away from here.
Yeah. Well, first of all, beginning of your question, the allocation of all the resources and looking at the competitors and their results. How I proceed is looking at your business. What is needed in your business? Where, and your strategy. Because although you can look at a competitor and they get certain results, you're like, I want that result too. You still don't know what part in their strategy was this result. Was it halfway? Was it completely? Was it way over what they imagined? And so I always feel like looking at a competitor or just another business, it's not useful to base decisions on. It's useful to get inspired. It's
Mhm.
useful to see, oh wow, that's also all
Possible.
possible. And but not base your internal decisions on what you see on the outside, because it's simply not possible. And that's yeah, I like to make comparisons to real life. Well, real life, like you as a person, if you see someone with a certain body type and you're like, I want that too, yeah, you don't know what goes and what they do for it. You just
Yeah.
can't.
You
And
can't achieve.
yeah, and if you do exactly the same, the result also won't be the same. Like, why is diet industry so big? Because
Right.
people are looking for that. So I always like to make comparisons that are really
That's a good
relatable to
that's a
people.
good one. That's a good one. Yeah, because everybody is structured differently. So no matter
Yeah,
even if you have the same diet, if you're 6'2" versus 5'2", um,
it's
a diet's
different.
gonna look different on you, right? So yeah,
Yeah,
I agree. That's a actually a great analogy. So and then
yeah.
how often um do you recommend when people start implementing a strategy, checking back on if the resource allocation is on the right track? Is that weekly? Is that monthly?
Well, first I always say it depends on. Like I'm a lawyer from origin, so I love the it depends on all facts. But
Yeah,
um, I would say if you're not used to doing it, like if you're not used to checking in, how is my allocation? What do I need to change? Then don't go for too small of an interval. Then just go for once a month. Just a monthly recurring meeting to check on it if you're not used to it. But if you're used to it, if you're on a tight schedule, if you want to reach your goals within a pretty small time limit, it might be needed to do it every 2 weeks. Like I would, it can even be 1 week, but always take into account how much of a effort is it to do that check, to actually implement the changes that you find during that check. Is a week then enough to implement changes, and can you make new decisions then? Probably a week will be a little bit too short, but a certain
okay,
project that maybe runs for like only 8 weeks asks for
maybe.
this interval. But would also always say first look where you're now, and is it feasible to do it, yeah, every 2 weeks or every month, or if it's a very long project, maybe even every 3 months. But don't give yourself a certain interval which you almost know certain you can't reach it, you can't do it. Then it won't work. You have to find a way that it works for you,
That
and
makes
that's
sense.
really important.
Hey, Phyllis, what is the most common obstacle about implementing a business strategy? This is kind of, we've got about 8 minutes left. I have three more questions, but this is a good one, I think. What is the most common obstacle? What do you hear people say about past trying to implement, or what do you see they struggle with? Why are people not implementing their strategy?
Not having defined the right steps.
Okay.
Just like, well, like I started, you begin with that end goal in mind and you have to take steps in between. And if you don't know what is expected from each step in between, or how small those steps need to be, if all those steps are way too big and it's dumped on someone from a team, and they're like, yeah, what do I need to do with this? Like, it's not clearly defined enough, it's not actionable enough. So yeah, I would say the actionability, is that a
Well,
word? I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah. That's the hardest part when you set your strategy and set your goals, but then put the plan and make that roadmap. Every task has to be clearly defined. Every step. This is done. Now you're going to move this. Now move to this, and then also who's responsible. That makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense. So I want to move on to data. How important is data when you're creating the strategy, the planning process, but also making decisions on putting that strategy together? How important is data in strategic planning? And if we have quick time, what kind of data should we be looking for?
I would say data is important to base your, yeah, to implement in a strategy, to take it into account. And because it's combined with that fact of having the reasonable goals that are actually within reach, and not just something, yeah, from the tip of your tongue, like, okay, yeah, well, this, yeah, sounds nice, would be
Yeah,
cool. So if you have the data, you can also know, okay, which part do I need to give some extra attention to? And looking back at what you've already done in the past, that data, just having your own numbers, your own, if for example with social media, I imagine, like, well, if you go for the advertising part, the data of, okay, what did we put in back then and what did we get out at that moment? Of
Yeah.
course, you
Yeah.
can make it better.
Yeah.
You can go on fine tuning,
Improve
or
your
you can,
improve your
yeah,
conversion rate and up your budget and all those things. That makes sense. So data is important in order to know where you were and what worked then and to move forward. So then my last question leads right into that. How about scaling? So now you have a strategic plan. You started with some goals. It worked. So say you worked with a client and you're like, we had this goal we wanted to do, and they come back to you and say, Phyllis, now we want to scale. Like, we want to hire 3 employees, we want to get 3x our business. How do you support somebody like this? What kind of, is it basically we're going to do 3 times as much in a strategic plan? Is that too simple? Like, how do you do? I'm just throwing it out there because somebody might say, well, I want to scale. Is that a different kind of plan? I'm going to leave it to you.
yeah.
Like, how do we do that?
Yeah, it's not being said that if you go with 3 new employees that you have 3 times the output. So first of all, it's really important to have your expectations clear. Like, what do you expect if you hire 3 new employees? But is your business also suited for 3 new employees? Like, do you already have employees, or are those your first? And then, okay, three, let's just maybe start with one, just see how that works. Take your lessons from that. What works, what didn't work, what do we really need? So it's, again, having your expectations straight and making your plan around that. And also, like, employees, they're people and things can happen with people. And you don't want to base your whole business scaling or strategy on your employees. You want to have a more broad system to base that scaling on. And of course, the employees play a role, definitely, when it's coming to, we don't have enough input of people working here. But yeah, also look at systems to manage all your data. For example, like, how can we make it more easy to see what does our data say, or our contact, like, or you say CRM? I think
CRM,
so. Huh? Yes, yeah. Like, I've
CRM,
never
yes,
used it in an English context, but
yes, yes,
like,
CRM.
how can we improve that? How can we get it more efficient? And also, with efficiency, you can grow a lot with not even having to have that employees. Like, are employees the way for your scaling
So I
wishes?
love that. So basically, what you're saying is the simple thought that that a business owner might have when they see success is like, I'll just do more of what I've been doing. I added 1 employee, so in order to scale, I just add 1 or 2 more. I'm going to scale. You're saying no, no, no. You need a new strategic plan because you might be able to scale with better systems and not more employees. You might be able to scale with other things, and you have to redefine your goals. So basically the answer is you've got to create a new strategy if you want to scale, because there'll be
Yeah,
different goals and different ways to attain it. So
yeah,
that is great. So if you've been watching and if you have a business, it's always a good time in the fall to create a business strategy for the next year. I mean, anytime you can create a business strategy, but I'm pretty busy in the fall. Do you have a seasonal time, Phyllis, that you're busier than other times that you see like people are, wanting the strategy, or is it year round for you? People come to you at any time of year.
I would say indeed the fall, like towards the end of the year, is getting busier because, like, 1st of January is always such a big moment for a lot of people. Well,
Yeah,
it's just a day in the year, but everyone is then like, okay, next year I'm changing. Next
yeah,
year I'm going to do this. So you really see towards the end of the year,
right.
you see an influx of that, like, oh shoot, I have to prioritize. Well, but I feel like, don't just only do it then. also
Right.
like how many bits, like be true to yourself and just also see in maybe April or in July, like, okay, I made a wonderful strategy. Am I actually implementing it? Am I still on
Right.
track? Or is it just, okay, I made some nice fancy strategy at the end of
Right.
last year and now it's, oh, I don't know, I can't even find it anymore. So it would be great if it would be a year-round thing, but you see it more towards the end of the year, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I've got a lot more questions, but we're at the end of 30 minutes. So, Phyllis, where can people connect with you? How can they find you? Where are you most active on social media?
I'm most active on my Instagram,
Okay.
my English Instagram. And I have a podcast too. I always
Okay.
forget it, where you've been a
Okay.
guest too.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
people can find me there too. Yeah, that's for now. That's for my English business. The
Okay.
Dutch business, I'm more active, like all around places. That they
Okay.
also
All
on
right. Well,
LinkedIn.
I'll make sure to put the links in the show notes so everybody can connect with you. If you want to connect with Phyllis, if you happen to be in Canada and you're a business owner and you want strategy, or you're in the Netherlands and you're watching this because I have a pretty international audience and you need a business strategist, connect with Phyllis for sure. And yeah, go listen to her podcast. And Phyllis, I appreciate you getting up super early and being here live with us. I appreciate all of you here live watching this with us. And I'll be back next week with one more episode of Strategy Talks before I take the summer hiatus. So I have one more great guest next week, and then we're going to pause for about 6 weeks. So, Phyllis, thank you so much for being here.
Thank
And
you for
bye,
inviting me.
everybody. We'll see you soon. Bye.